Here's the thing this year, radio is out of date. You should have thought twice before playing that as the intro. But Mike,
that was Dinah Washington. That was, what did you say, 1953?
53, I think that was.
Radio is out of date.
Yes. TV is the
1953.
Yes, yes.
That didn't happen, did it?
No, we're still going strong, obviously, hopefully. Now, Mike, at 23 past 8, I'd like to introduce you to somebody I listen to. He does a podcast called Televised Revolution. If people are into podcasting and that sort of thing, look it up because it is fabulous. Dan Barrett joins us from Queensland. How are you, Dan?
Hey, how you doing tonight, guys?
Yeah, very
good, Dan.
Your podcast is all about TV. There's a couple of mates and yourself sit around and just chat about all things televised.
That's right. We sit in the front room of my house with a few microphones and beers in hand and have a chat about television.
Are you in the television industry, Dan?
No, I'm very much on the outskirts, the far fringe.
So you're not constrained by the politics. You can say what you like on your podcasts.
Oh, that's it. There's an open mouth and an open mic.
Now, I wanted to get you on because there's, in some of your podcasts, especially toward the end of this year, there's been many times I've been listening to it and thought, oh, I've never really thought that deeply about these issues and things that you bring up. So I just had a couple of questions I thought might be of interest to the listeners with the behind-the-scenes sort of things with television.
Sure thing.
Now, Gina Rinehart's investment in Channel 10, why did she do it? What does she want to achieve, and has it made a difference, and will it make a difference?
I just think she's been wildly sort of interesting in this, in that she was really honest about why she wanted to get involved at Channel 10. Basically, she just really wanted a platform to be able to influence politics and the public discourse. So by actually getting a seat on the board at 10, she's able to do things like make sure that Andrew Bolt keeps on getting a slot on Channel 10, and also just have a bit of an influence over the news as it starts to report on things like, say, for example, mining.
Well, she's certainly got an interest in mining, being Australia's wealthiest person and all. But aren't there laws against editorial interference without declaration? I suppose you can, if you own the station, you can do what you like, really.
Yeah, I mean, as long as she's not really being overt about it, I think that it's not really such an issue. And I mean, I don't think, as long as she's not really sort of being, I guess, too evil to the point where people really notice that she's taking that effect. I mean, I'm kind of willing to let it sort of slide under the carpet. And I'm a lefty sort of, heart-beating guy that really believes in the purity of the media. But I mean, it doesn't really hurt to get an alternative view sort of being sort of broadcast out that way. And you don't really find that in TV the same way you do radio. So it's an interesting voice.
So in effect, she can own a television station and say, I want to make sure, as owner of the station, I want Andrew Bolt to have a gig. She can't directly control what he says, of course, and he wouldn't have a bar of that, obviously. But by knowing that his thoughts are along the same lines as hers, she does have that sort of control.
No, that's exactly right.
Interesting. Point 2 for you. The breakfast TV battle will hot up next year. Mel and Koshy, of course, on 7 on Sunrise. Carl Stefanovic, and who's on with Carl? Lisa? Is it Lisa?
Lisa Wilkinson.
Yep. And Channel 10 are making a foray into television breakfast TV next year.
Yeah, so there's really big questions at the moment as to who's hosting. So we know that Paul Henry, who's a New Zealand breakfast TV newscaster, has a fair bit of controversial notes. He'll be on there. And Dr. Andrew Rochford, who people would know from breakfast radio in Melbourne, I believe he's on. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I actually think he's Sydney, isn't he?
It must be Sydney Mix that he was hosting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's going to be a female host, but there's big question marks as to who that is. But the really interesting guy in this is Paul Henry, who's the guy who's made like a fairly large number of controversial statements, and it's this sort of thing where he'll make one of these jokes on the air, which is wildly inappropriate, but it'll be picked up on YouTube, and he becomes a bit of a YouTube sensation. I think 10 really want to tap into that and hopefully get some sort of heat through, I guess, this controversial aspect.
I wonder if Channel 10 have looked at it from a Melbourne perspective. I know in Sydney, and I'm not sure about Queensland where you are, but in Sydney, people are just generally accepting of anyone. They just love a bit of a fight, a bit of a punch up, and they don't particularly care who's broadcasting from where. In Melbourne, we're very parochial, and even if someone comes from Sydney, we don't like them. So I don't think that we will accept him as a New Zealander coming on and making jokes. Apparently his humour's quite biting. I don't think we will accept in Melbourne that that his humour will be suitable for us.
Yeah, I mean, in Queensland, I think we care even less than Sydney people do. Anything goes. You can wear shorts and we're fine with that. I mean, I guess the real question would be whether he's really a good suit, like a good fit for Channel 10. Because Channel 10's a fairly youthy kind of a network, and suddenly you've got this breakfast show where you've really got sort of some middle-aged guys who are presenting, and it's going to have a distinctly sort of adult tone.
Yeah.
Where I think that's sort of going wrong with that. I think they want to go a little bit youthier and have sort of a few younger people on there, and maybe target the singles rather than the families, which is what 9 and 7 both do quite successfully on their breakfast shows.
It's interesting you say that. I actually thought what 10 were doing last year, going, News and George Negus, I thought that was a step in the right direction, because their whole concept of television for the last couple of years has pretty much been, let's put The Simpsons on. But now that they're faced with all the digital channels of 7 7 Mate and Go and all of that, doing all those youth-oriented shows, I thought Channel 10 were sort of biting the bullet and saying we're actually going to have to grow up and become really serious.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt the same way. And even if you look at, say, that last year or so of Big Brother, for example, you actually found the audience for that were really senior. They weren't really necessarily drawing young people that you would think are actually watching that. So I think they recognised that and then saw the success of MasterChef, which, again, a much older audience, and they realised that we really do have a network for an older group of viewers.
Well, the change, one of the profound changes, Dan, has been that you can have a family of 2 adults and 3 teenage children, say, and the parents may be watching television, free-to-air television, but you can bet your boots that the 3 kids will be all on their internets or their iPhone, and that young market is not watching free-to-air television like it used to, which leads me to the question, which I'm interested in your thought on this. Why are we seeing breakfast television exploding? I mean, I don't remember the last time I turned my television on in the morning, or why I did. It would be years ago. Now, I'm way out of the younger demographic, but, I might turn the radio on, have a bit of listen to 3AW, see what's happened overnight. But why are we seeing such a sudden explosion in breakfast television? And is there enough advertising dollar to go around?
Yeah, well, I mean, the audience in breakfast isn't really massive, but what you do have is a studio doesn't really cost that much compared to creating some sort of scripted program and whatnot, but the benefits that come from the branding that you're really able to bring to a network. And if you look at Channel 7 a few years ago, part of the big success, the revitalization of 7, was that they had Sunrise, and suddenly they had 3 or 4 presenters who were instantly highly identifiable that they could not only use in Sunrise, but use across all their promotions, have the occasional specials through the week, and you've suddenly got this core group of people who define what Channel 7's all about. And I think I've kind of seen the value of that for an overall marketing sort of concept.
And I suppose with Koshi, he was actually exposed in another time slot as well with his financial commentary that he did on the same network. So I suppose it was an extension of his popularity as a financial commentator that gave them a double-edged sword and maybe drew people to it. I mean, I shouldn't not, and I'm not knocking it really. I've done the program quite a number of times as a performer, but I often wonder who's watching, because so many people over the decades previous tried breakfast television and most failed.
Yeah, I mean, it was also interesting that you mentioned Koshi, because he was, of course, a Channel 10 star for a little while, with a show where he and his family were showing sort of financial advice at that macro family level.
Oh, that was on 10, was it? Okay.
That was on 10, so that was years ago. He did do a few
yeah.
stints across Channel 7 before Sunrise came about.
Interesting. Now, a question for you with Foxtel. My mother-in-law has Foxtel. I don't, and I just don't have the need for it. But I can't help wondering, because I get a lot of television through other things nowadays, and with the advent of the Telstra's T-Box, where you can stream television from the internet straight through to your television, Apple TV, YouTube, Sony, I think, have smart TVs. There's so many different ways to get television now, and that's only going to grow. Will Foxtel survive?
I think it will. Now, one of the big, really interesting news stories for me last year was that Kim Williams, who was the CEO at Foxtel, he moved on to become the overall head at News Corp when, that sort of position opened up. So effectively, what makes that interesting is that Kim Williams was the guy that kind of revolutionised what cable television can be in Australia by introducing things like the digital hard drive recorder and setting up a TV catch-up service that I've got, which hasn't been wildly successful, but he really has sort of shifted that game with Foxtel being adaptable. So it's not about that black cable coming out of your wall to your television anymore, but rather it is like this weird multi-platform endeavour. And so you can actually now get Foxtel broadcast through the internet if you've got an Xbox 360 at home or a T-Box, and you get your Foxtel that way. And I think what you're going to start seeing is that when Apple TVs come out, like an actual TV, as opposed to that weird little black box they sell, and also there's going to be like a Google TV and the various Sony smart TVs and the like, you're probably going to find Foxtel as like just a little sort of widget on your screen they can click into, and it will take you to like a large Foxtel service.
Which you'll still have to pay for, so you'll get it on demand by paying for it when you click it, will you?
That's right. It's still subscription television. It's just a different way of accessing that service.
Okay.
And a different way of paying for it, I would imagine, at that point in time.
I'd imagine. I mean, if you look at the Xbox or the T-Box, you pay a little bit less than you do if you've got the hardwired cable coming into your house. So, I mean, they already are looking at flexible sort of options. And, of course, the types of channels you get on these services are also a little bit different. They can do it a little bit younger and a little less lifestyle-y.
Sure.
Now, two more quick questions before we go, because time is tight. I was one of the people who was stupid enough, not you, to rush out and buy a 3D television. Should I have?
I don't really think so. I mean, 3D TV kind of came and went very quickly, and it's sort of become like an added feature that people just suddenly realise is on their television when they've purchased it. I think the real sort of future of TV is smart televisions. So TVs connected to the internet where you can stream large amounts of TV content through your TVs. Now, there isn't really a lot of sort of, I guess, great smart TVs out yet, but it's still really infancy for this as a platform. So give it a couple of years, and I think you're going to start seeing a lot of really interesting content, maybe Foxtel, for example, coming through your TV. And that's where the game is. 3D TV, just a bit of a gimmick.
And lastly, reality TV. Junior MasterChef didn't do all that well this year. Channel 10 had that Renovators program which bombed, but they tell us it'll be back. Is reality TV on the way out?
Well, the other day, James Warburton, who was head of sales at 7, has spent the last sort of 8 months or so waiting to become the CEO at Channel 10. So he took the seat the other day, and he gave this really interesting announcement through, I think, the Daily Telegraph was where the report came through, and he was talking about the fact that Renovators won't be back next year, Junior MasterChef won't be back next year, and what they're doing is they're going to have less reliance on reality television. So that's not necessarily saying that reality TV is on the way out. I think it's quite the opposite. But what you're going to see is less of these sort of big shows at 7 o'clock that they kind of hang their entire schedule on. So it's not necessarily going to be about waiting 2.5 hours for the Renovators and the big sort of question as to who's won this around to sort of wind out before you can watch the rest of your programming. But it might just be short half-hour reality shows, really low budget and specifically geared at very specific demographics.
Well, it won't make any difference to me, Dan, because I hate reality, and Simon and I were talking outside. We think it should be, it's misnamed. It should be called contrived television.
Very much so. I mean, I'm completely in your camp on this one.
Bear Grylls and Big Brother come to mind.
Now, Dan, we must fly. Thank you very much for chatting to us. The podcast is called Televised Revolution.
That's right. You can find it at televisedrevolution.com or theradiowolf.com, where we've got a bunch of other podcasts also about TV and internet sort of stuff. So check it out if you're interested.
And you're on Twitter?
We are on Twitter, TV_Rev, R-E-V.
Excellent. Good on you, Dan.
Thanks so much, guys.
Keep up the good work, Dan. It's really interesting what you're doing. Thanks.
Good on you. That's Dan Barrett. It is 24 to 9 on 3AW. Mike, we must break, but I want to get more thoughts on reality television. I'd be interested to know if anyone actually watches it, takes an interest in it, cares. Do you get attached to those characters?
Well, they don't care as much, obviously, because Big Brother's gone, but let's see whether it's coming back. Let's see if anybody misses it.
Yes. All right, we'll do on the other side of this.